Hello, beautiful community. You're very welcome to this tiny chat where I'll have a go at saying something brief about a question I've been getting a lot recently, which is what if the war moves into a kind of state of pause or semi-pause? How likely is that? Who's pushing for it? Who's going to benefit from it? How worried should we be about it? And you're not going to hear me that well because I don't have a microphone. I'm just on a very rare outing to Cambridge, England, UK. So there are a lot of parties involved, but let's just hop very quickly across the three parties we immediately think of. Let's start with Ukraine. Ukraine is being supported to the level of independence plus, as I call it. It's not being supported to the level of a victory. And that doesn't mean it can't get a victory. It means that the victory would exceed, right, the expectations one might have if one went off the intent behind the support Ukraine's getting from the West. And depending on what happens over the next couple of months with the counteroffensive, Ukraine may reach a situation where the Zelensky government needs a kind of renegotiation with the country, because it may be that the Zelensky government has a kind of a mandate for a short to medium length victorious war, but it does not obviously have, doesn't mean it couldn't gain one, a mandate for a much longer war that is either not a victorious war or a war with a complicated and sort of long distance aspiration of victory. And let's call victory here Ukraine becoming whole again. Now, none of that, however, means that Ukraine is interested in a pause. Of course, what Ukraine is interested in is more support from the West and a maximal internationalization of the war. And a very central reason why Ukraine can't be fundamentally interested in a pause is that we know what we know about the track that the Putin regime is on, which is that cessation of fire or a continuation of the war at a lower level is an opportunity for them to reconstitute and live out their fantasy of a complete exhaustion of Western support for Ukraine. And then escalation later. But let's come to the Russians in a second. What about the United States? Well, the United States is roughly committed to independence plus for Ukraine. The United States may be in a very different place after the next presidential election. And in the run-up to that election, there are some reasons for the Biden administration to dream of the war story not being primary in the news cycle. But this is all a kind of precarious and ad hoc business, because we are keen to avoid a set of 4, 5, 7 things, right, in the West, and that's what American policy represents. But if we asked what positive vision is US policy pursuing, these things are harder to answer. And that's to do with a lack of imagination of what we want to see happen on the ex-Soviet space. What do we want to see happen on the Russian space? And the trouble is that you cannot weigh the amount of support you should give Ukraine properly unless you have a story about what you want to have happen on that territory in the years to come. And then off that story, you can read an appropriate level of support, right? So if we had certain very clear goals of that kind, we may be more directly committed to Ukrainian victory. The Russian situation is clear. They're interested in a minimally globalized conflict, in a relatively low-level conflict for the next few years, so as to escalate later on the assumption that the West's going to be weaker and its support for Ukraine will, to a good degree, expire by then. That's their idea. Is there anything else that we can sort of add into this picture that has enormous importance? I think we can. And that's the Ukrainian people. Because right at the beginning of the war, it's the Ukrainian people and that civic unity and that extremely visceral and very widespread reaction in Ukraine to the invasion that got the West on board. And if for months, and if need be years, there is a glaring absence in Ukraine of a civic support basis for giving away a lot of territory to Russia, that will impact Western policy. And that is absolutely, without doubt, where we are now. There is no civic support in Ukraine for a termination of the war, right, that doesn't restore Ukraine's territories. Now, what would things look like, and could the war end at all, if Ukraine didn't get back all its territories? Well, the only solution there would be that the divide between the bit of Ukraine that Russia steals and the rest of Ukraine is so firmly backed by security guarantees that are essentially on the level of NATO membership for Ukraine, right? Short of that, there wouldn't be an end. And if Putin is still in power, even that wouldn't guarantee an end of the war, I'm afraid. So it's a difficult story, and quite frankly, a lot will depend on what happens on the battlefield in the next few weeks and months. But we know that we have not given Ukraine enough to win. So we'll talk again very, very soon. I'm working on a major video on the main channel. It might be the best video, I think, that we've had on the main channel. And it's going to be a critique of the soft on Putin anti-imperialist Western left. And it is going to be a kind of an evergreen video that also speaks much more eloquently than this video has to what's wrong with asking for a cessation of the war and for negotiation. Lots of love. Talk very soon.